Hello and welcome to this fourth installment of translating Julius Caesar's account of the Battle of Pharsalus in Book 3 of his Civil War, today looking at section 86. At the end of the last section, we ended on something of a cliffhanger with Caesar leading out his troops to battle. In this section, in true dramatic style, Caesar has switched the action back to what was taking place prior to the battle in Pompey's command tent. And the intention here is just to make it clear the means by which Pompey expected to achieve victory, or at least Caesar's understanding of what Pompey's plan was to achieve victory. And so without further ado, we have the text, and let's go. Pompeius quoque, ut postea cognitum est, suorum omnium hotatu statuerat provelio decatare. Namque etiam in concilio superioribus diebus dixerat priusquam conquererent acies fore uti exequitus Caesaris peloretur. So we start off the first line nice and easy with Pompeius in the nominative singular, so he's our subject, followed by a few adverbs actually, but quoque is an adverb just meaning also or to. So we have Pompey also. Ut here as an adverb meaning as. It's not a subordinating conjunction here, just meaning as, and postea, later. As later cognitum est, and we have our verb here. This is a perfect tense, third person singular passive. Really used impersonally here. It's sort of got the neuter form of the participle. As it was later learnt. So we've got like cognition, cognizance, that sort of sense from this verb. As it was later learnt. And here's our main verb for Pompeius, statuerat. So we've moved into the pluperfect tense here. So it's taken place prior to it being established for Caesar. So statuerat in the pluperfect, third person singular active indicative. Like English statute, he had made an official public decision. He had made the decision, really. And that's taking an infinitive as its direct object, decotare, to settle, really, to decide. And so in that sense, really to finalize, to settle the issue, proelio. So we've got the word for battle in the ablative singular, by means of a battle. But it also done this hortatu. So we've got another ablative here, really like English exhort, exhortation, so like encouragement. He'd done this really on account of the encouragement, omnium suorum. So we have omnium in the genitive plural, it's a substantive adjective, really meaning all. And suorum is the third person possessive adjective, agreeing with omnium. All of his own men. It's in the masculine plural as well. So, at the encouragement of all of his own men, he had decided to settle the issue by battle. Namque etiam. So we have this adverbial pairing that Caesar likes to start off sentences with. Indeed, namque, indeed, etiam, even, in concilio. So we have preposition in with the ablative singular for concilium, so in council. Superioribus diebus. So we have the ablative plural of the word for day. Superioribus is a comparative adjective agreeing with diebus. So we've got that eor to indicate the comparative form. Superior, but in a temporal sense. It's taking precedence in time, so it really means the preceding days, and the ablative form indicating the time during which. So really during the preceding days. And we have a main verb here. So Pompeius is the subject for this verb as well. Dixerat, which is another pluperfect, third person singular active, he had said. And this is going to introduce quite a funky construction. So we've got it, first of all, introducing an accusative and infinitive, and foray is our infinitive. That's the verb to be, future infinitive. Something like it would be the case. It's got a kind of impersonal passive sense here. Uti, that. And this is kind of balancing a few different things, two different things really. So priusquam is adverbial. So we've got prius, so that's another comparative time here, like earlier, compounded with quam. Quam being the equivalent of English than in this context. So earlier than, so before. Acies concurrerent, the lines, nominative plural, and that's the subject for this verb here, concurrerent. Literally, they would run together, but really, in a military context, they're running at each other, so they're engaging. Is what is meant here. So even before they would engage, remembering we're in the subjunctive, exequitus Caesaris pilleretur. Exequitus is another nominative, so that's in the singular, that's the word for army. Caesaris, so that's Caesar in the possessive genitive. Pilleretur, and that's the verb. So that's imperfect subjunctive again, but third person singular passive. It would be beaten, broken, smashed, driven off, routed, something along those lines. So Pompey, Pompey had said it would be the case that even before the armies were engaged, or even before the lines would engage, rather, Caesar's army would be routed. And by way of translation, Pompey too, as it was later learnt, had decided upon fighting a battle due to the encouragement of all his own men. Indeed, he had even said in council during the preceding days that before the lines were engaged, Caesar's army would be routed. Okay, so quite the statement. Suorum omnium I've put as of all of his own men, could mean of all of his own officers or senior officers, something along those lines. That's not specified here, but from the context, you could draw that meaning and translate it into English, and that's probably capturing the sense of what Caesar means, though I'm not totally sure about that. So I've just stuck with of all of his own men. And as we'll see, this was quite surprising for Pompey's staff. Id cum essent plerique admirati, scio me, inquit, paene incredibilem rem pollicere, sed rationem concili mei accipite, quo miore animo in proelium prodeatis. So we start off our sentence with it. Id, really at this, that's all it's really meant here. I don't think there's anything special really to say about that. At this, cum, this is a causal cum, so it's not a preposition since it's followed by the verb. But really causal at this, and this is our subject, plerique. Really, it's plerique is a kind of, I guess, emphatic suffix here. but it's a plural subject, and so that's the subject for the verb to be, assent, third person plural, active subjunctive. It's a predicate construction, though. It's really at this since the very many, the majority, were admirati, and then we have a perfect participle. They were astonished. That's agreeing with pluri admirati, so plural perfect participle. Not precisely admiration. It is astonishment, but not precisely admiration, even though the word is quite similar, and from which we also get things like miracles and mirabilis and so on. But really, the majority were astonished at this, but kind of in a "are you serious" kind of way. So Pompey will elaborate further. Inquit. So we met this verb last time. So it's a present tense, third person singular active. He says, "Skiome." Uh, so we're in the present tense again here. Skio, I know. Say present tense, first person singular active indicative, and he's taking himself as the direct object. So we have may, the first person reflexive pronoun in the accusative singular. I know myself, and this is going to be the subject for this infinitive, polykeri. So polykeri, this is a present infinitive. It's active in meaning. It looks passive because it's a deponent verb. To be promising. I know myself to be promising. Paine, it's an adverb meaning almost. So I know myself almost to be promising rem incredibilem. So that's our direct object of polykeri. Rem, accusative singular, a matter, a thing, incredibilem, like English incredible. An incredible thing, an unbelievable thing. So yes, it is a hell of a statement for Pompey to make. And in Caesar's version, he knows this. I know myself to be promising almost, or I know myself almost to be promising an incredible thing. Said, but acipite. So we have a plural imperative here. Like English accept, but yeah, in some sense like accept, but really open your minds. So like be open to the idea. And so receive the word of the Lord in that sense, like open your heart, open your minds. Um, and it's an imperative, it's an order. Like Romani ite domum. Romans go home. So that ite sort of indicates, in this case, indicates the plural imperative. Ite by itself is also a plural imperative for go. So go away. Acipite. So he's really dramatically commanding, be open to, receive, rationem, accusative singular, the logic, me, concili me, um, concili like advice, but really here, so it's a genitive singular, more like plan, strategy, may, the reflexive pronoun in the genitive singular first person agreeing with concili. Really it's a partitive genitive, but so possessed by Pompey. So a bit of a mix of things going on there. Receive, be open to the logic of my plan, of my strategy. Quo, and so we move into a relative clause following that. Ablative singular, by means of which, and we have our verb here in the subjunctive. So that's the present subjunctive, that's a second person plural active. Kind of a eusive sense of exhortation as well, encouragement, by means of which you may go forth in proelium. In the preposition with the accusative singular of battle, really into battle, towards battle. Firmiore animo. So animo is our noun in the ablative singular again, like animus, soul, spirit, mind. In this case, really spirit or courage or something along those lines. They're going into battle. So something along those lines. Firmiore is a comparative adjective qualifying animo. So that is also in the ablative singular, like English firm, confirm, really to strengthen. So the stronger in spirit, something along those lines. So by means of which you may go forth into battle, the stronger in spirit. So basically, he's encouraging them, look, if you understand the plan, you'll be confident of victory as I am now. And so here we are in translation. Since most of them expressed astonishment at this, he says, I know myself to be promising something almost unbelievable, but be open to the logic of my plan, by which you shall go forth into battle the stronger in spirit. Okay, so quite a statement by Pompey, but just giving all of his astonished officers a little bit of encouragement that, yep, don't worry, I've actually got this all worked out. And so we're going to move on into the meat of Pompey's plan now, or at least as Caesar understood it. Persuasi quidibus nostris idque mihi facturos confirmaverunt, ut cum proprius sit accessum dextrum Caesaris cornu ad latere aperto aggrederentur et circumventa ab tergo acie prius perturbat. Pardon me. I was going to stumble over that. Perturbatum excitum pellerent quam a nobis tellum in hostem iaceretur. Okay, so Pompey probably said this rather more smoothly than I did. This is still part of Pompey's speech as well, so we've still got quite a lot to go. So he starts off with a verb, again in the first person. So this is the perfect tense, first person singular active indicative. English persuade is fairly clear from that, and that is pretty much exactly what this means from persuadeo. But that takes a dative as its object. So equidibus nostris is a dative plural. So we've got cavalry and nostris, the first person plural possessive, agreeing with cavalry. So I have persuaded our cavalry. And so the que here just been a connective conjunction. And confirmaverunt. So the cavalry now are the subject for this verb, which is going to introduce its own kind of self-contained accusative and infinitive. Confirmaverunt, like English confirm. They've provided the assurance, something along those lines. Third person singular? No, third person plural active indicative, perfect tense. So the cavalry, they have assured, provided the assurance rather. They have confirmed, something along those lines. And they have confirmed that. So this is introducing an indirect statement, which is going to be the accusative and infinitive. Facturos. So that's our future participle. It's for the future infinitive, or really a future perfect infinitive. Facturos. So we've got the accusative plural ending there in the masculine. Really, that it will be done. So id is also in the accusative. It's a neuter singular, but it is the object of the infinitive verb. So really, essay understood here. Facturos, so they have provided the assurance that they will do it. Mihi, reflexive pronoun in the dative. It's dative of benefit. They will do it for me. And so that's its own kind of self-contained thing. Um, clause, perhaps, would be a good word there. And ut. So we're now introducing another indirect statement. This time it's dependent on persuasi. So what he has persuaded the cavalry to do, and what they have assured him they are going to do, is so it's a kind of consecutive, but really just an indirect statement with another subordinate clause nested straight away. So we have a temporal cum here. When proprius, another comparative, well, it's really a comparative adjective, but it's sort of translated adverbially, more closely, closer. I've opted for a sense of time, like since it is part of a temporal clause, um, on the point of sit acessum. So we have a perfect tense, subjunctive, third person, singular, passive. Again, with that it's a like neuter, so the kind of here it's kind of impersonal, and it's not entirely clear what Pompey is referring to. I assume that he's referring to his own line, though. It's not clear, though, and it's not already established by this point. It's something that Caesar's only going to mention later, but Pompey was expecting Caesar's line to advance up to his own. His own troops he was going to hold back and hold their own position rather than advance to meet Caesar's. So really, when he says sit accessum, like English access, really when it should be more closely approached, it's a fairly literal translation of that. So when he says it should be more closely approached, I think he's referring to his own line. And that's what I'm taking from that anyway. Aggrederentur. So the cavalry are the subject for this verb, equidibus nostris. So we have a third person plural, subjunctive, active. Really, they will attack. English aggression comes from this verb, the perfect form aggressor sum. Aggrederentur. They will attack, and they will attack corner, which, despite how it looks, is an accusative singular. It's a fourth declension neuter singular noun, which has some of the, probably the worst morphology out of all of the declensions, because every case except the genitive, like in the singular, every case except the genitive has the exact same ending. So taking that word by itself, it could be nominative, vocative, accusative, dative, or ablative. But in this case, we're helped out by the adjective dextrum, which is accusative singular as well, neuter, and agreeing with cornu. Dextrum, like dexter, really means right hand side, and cornu meaning wing. Really, like it actually means horn, but wing is a bit more standard in English. If you think of like a cornetto ice cream. It sort of derives from this word. It's a horn, but translate as wing, I think. Though, as you can see here, the Romans would often think of different sections of the army as horns. So he's going to attack the right wing, or rather, the cavalry is going to attack the right wing. Caesaris. Again, we have the possessive genitive of Caesar's name. So they're going to attack Caesar's right wing, ab lateria perto. From, so preposition ab, rather, with the ablative, singular in this case, latere, side, aperto, open, really, like in modern Italian. But in a military context, it's more like exposed flank or unguarded flank. The cavalry is going to take advantage of the fact that Caesar's right wing is not going to have anywhere near enough support in terms of cavalry to be able to, well, really to have any guard on its flank, and so it's going to be exposed. And so this is going to be the result of this maneuver. Circumventa Achaea. So that's an ablative absolute. Achaea feminine singular. The word for line in the ablative. Circumventa, agreeing with that. Perfect participle. Like English circumvent, means the same thing. Encircled, the line being encircled, or when the line has been encircled, and it is encircled ab tergo. Ab, again with the ablative singular, tergo, meaning like behind or rear. So the cavalry, they're attacking from the exposed flank, but the purpose of the attack is that they're going to surround the line. That's another translation of that from the rear. Um, so they're not directly attacking the side; they're attacking from the side to get behind the line. Circumventa, a lot of words that come like use this sort of prefix. Circum, Circum Vesuviana. If you want to visit Mount Vesuvius, there's the train line. Circumvent, circumvallate, circumlocution, and so on and so forth. Quite a useful prefix. But in any case, the line has been surrounded, so ablative absolute, the line having been surrounded from the rear. We will get back to Prius in a minute or less. Pellerent. So we have the same verb that we met before, but this is third person plural active, imperfect subjunctive. And again, the cavalry is the subject, like Pompey's cavalry is the subject for this verb. They will break, smash, they will rout in the active sense, they're going to cause a rout. They will drive away, drive from the field even. Executum perturbatum. The army, so we have accusative singular, it's the direct object. Perturbatum, the participle agreeing with executum. Thrown into confusion, disturbed, panicked, I've gone for here. Yeah, that's sort of really what that means. English perturbed, it doesn't quite capture the drama of what Caesar's aiming for here. The whole army is meant to be just in like total pandemonium by this point. Once the cavalry gets around behind them, wouldn't quite go for perturbed. Makes me think of an anecdote from Australian history. One of the pioneers, John MacArthur, was a fairly violent man. even according to his own wife, he would it was quite a lot to deal with. So he challenged a lot of different people. Duels, was involved in a whole host of different political intrigues to try and bring various of his enemies down. And he was referred to by the governor of New South Wales, Governor King, as the Great Perturbator, the Great Disruptor. Um, Disrupted probably is a bit weak, though. It's really meant to mean that, yeah, it's thrown into chaos, Caesar's army. Um, and the cavalry, so the army being thrown into chaos, the cavalry is going to drive them from the field, basically. And this is going to happen priusquam. So here, Caesar has separated what he compounded earlier. So again, prius earlier, quam than, and we have a passive verb. Tellum is the subject. Tellum, nominative singular, the word for weapon, iakaretur. Imperfect subjunctive, third person singular, passive. Um, like to hurl, to throw, to cast. So before a weapon is cast, a nobis, so preposition a with the ablative of the personal pronoun, the first person plural, by us, in hostem, in with the accusative singular, hostem, like English hostile, hostility, at the enemy, against the enemy, really. Um, so the cavalry attack Caesar's right. The line having been surrounded from the rear, they will drive off the panicked army before a weapon is thrown by us at the enemy. So Pompey's referring to the usual skirmishing that would take place with the legions at this time. So they would usually there would be either, it depends which author you go with, either the legions as a whole, which I don't think is totally plausible, but either the legions as a whole would throw two sets of javelins, or they would sort of rotate sentries, and there would be this kind of constant rotation of roughly maybe 80 men moving forward, throwing javelins, and then another sentry would move forward and take their place, and so on and so forth. But either way, when he says a weapon is cast, he's referring to this sort of skirmishing that takes place before a main infantry engagement, before they fight hand to hand. It's standard practice for them to throw javelins and other weapons at each other. And so, what I have here, I've persuaded the cavalry, and they have assured me that they will accomplish it, that when our line is on the point of being engaged, they will attack Caesar's right wing from the exposed flank, and the line having been surrounded from the rear, they will drive Caesar's panicked army from the field before a weapon is thrown by us at the enemy. I've kept persuaded here. Usually, in translation, that's put as I have ordered, but that's not the word Caesar uses. And he's fine with using the actual word for order, as in provide a command, when it's suitable for the case, but he's chosen to go with something else here. So I've retained persuaded. I'm just making a note that in translation you will often see it as I have ordered, but the actual word is persuaded. I suspect the reason Caesar has done this is the majority of his cavalry were provided by client states, and they were not precisely subjects, or not all of them were subjects of the Romans. They were allied and they had various obligations, but not all of them were subjects. And so I think Pompey has to persuade, at least for some of the case, and perhaps the majority of the case, rather than merely giving orders. I suspect that's why Caesar's used that particular verb. Um, and the other verb, iaceretur, which means here hurled. So I mentioned in the first section that I translated. So there's yaktaret here, which is the frequentative version of the same verb for hurling. Domitius yaktaret urbanum gratium dignitatem quae. So he's hurled this like a weapon. And I made a point of saying that the verb used is usually used in a military context. And that's exactly what is going on here. So it's just an example of that same verb. In that first section that I translated, it's sort of taken out of the context of the physical and used more sort of transfiguratively, but hurling as a weapon here. So this is its proper sort of military context. And so then we have Pompey's battle-winning strategy. Also, it seems to him, it's interesting to note that it is based on the cavalry and not the infantry, though. Even though he has a significant advantage in numbers in both cavalry and infantry, and at this time, it's fairly standard for the infantry to be the decisive factor in a battle. Here, Pompey has decided that it's going to be the cavalry that will achieve victory. Um, he has Caesar's own cavalry outnumbered about 7-1. And for that reason, I think when he describes his own cavalry as attacking Caesar's right wing, the numerical superiority that he has basically dictates that Caesar's own cavalry are not a factor. That it's just taken for granted, really, that Caesar's cavalry will not be able to stand up to the attack that Pompey's own cavalry are going to launch, and will be quickly out of the way. And so Pompey's own cavalry can then attack from the exposed flank, so basically they've caused it to be unguarded by driving off Caesar's cavalry. But it's interesting that that is taken for granted here, given that Caesar has, in this earlier section, made a point of saying that he'd innovated some tactics by ordering young men and lightly armored troops to fight among the cavalry, to the point that his own 1,000 cavalry could, even on fairly open ground, dare to withstand the charge of 7,000 Pompeians. And yet, in this speech of Pompey's, there is no mention of Caesar's cavalry. So it seems as though either Caesar was being very optimistic about the ability of his own cavalry to hold off far superior numbers, or Pompey just didn't take it at all seriously, despite what had happened in those few days where the second battle was fought. So it's interesting to note the absence of Caesar's cavalry in the planning here. It is very much taken for granted that they're just going to not play any significant role in the battle. And there are some assumptions built into this as well, and they are quite important. Most important assumption being that Caesar's infantry is going to fight in the standard triplex Achaeas formation, the triple line, and that there is not going to be some other fourth line waiting for the cavalry to execute this maneuver of surrounding the other three lines. The other thing is Pompey seems to be assuming that Caesar is also going to have all three of his infantry lines engage at more or less the same moment, or within very short sequence of each other. Again, this is standard, but it is an assumption, and both of these points will become very important later on because Caesar is able to take advantage of both of these assumptions to completely turn Pompey's expectations on his head. There we are. And another point as well about the cavalry is that they are quite lightly armed and armored. So when Pompey says here, uh, perturbatum executum, it's not because of kinetic force of the cavalry. It's because they have surrounded the army from the rear. It's really what he's hoping to do is shatter the morale of Caesar's army rather than use, even though he has quite a lot of cavalry, he's not expecting them to just charge into the infantry and smash their way through it. It's the fact that they've seized advantageous position behind Caesar's lines that is going to cause a mass panic, that is then going to enable the cavalry to drive the infantry from the field and basically perform most effectively. Because that's what the cavalry really in Western Europe and North Africa at this time. That's really what the cavalry does. They're quite lightly armored. They don't charge infantry head on, except in very unusual circumstances. And faced with a line of infantry, they're usually going to uh, only really skirmish with it. And they're often armed with javelins and swords, but they mainly use javelins. They don't go in for hand-to-hand combat unless the enemy's either lightly armed or retreating, or they're able to take an enemy in the flank. They're not used to sort of smash their way through lines, though. They are not either medieval knights or the sort of Eastern influenced cataphracts and clibanarii that the Romans themselves would adopt in later times. But they're all very much light cavalry, and it's not kinetic force, it's the impact on morale that Pompey is relying on to achieve victory here. And as we'll see, there is another reason why he wants to do this. So we'll get into that here. Ita sine periculo legionum et paene sine vulnere bellum conficiemus. Id autem difficile non est, cum tantum equitatu evaliemus. So we start here with another adverb, ita, just meaning thus, therefore. Sine with the ablative means without, and here periculo in the ablative singular, just without danger. Legionum, which is a genitive plural of the word for legion, legio. I believe genitive of person concerned here. It's without danger to the legions. Et paene, so that adverb again, almost. Sine, again, without. Vulnere is our ablative singular. Really, it means wound. So without a wound, you might say. In English, you could say without bloodshed. It means the same thing, really. And our main verb here is conficiemos, which is a first-person plural, active indicative, future tense. Like really compound word of confacio. It's like we shall complete, we shall finish bellum, accusative singular of the word for war. So we shall finish the war without danger to the legions and almost without a wound, or almost without bloodshed. Id autum difficile non est. So id, just meaning English it here, that's a nominative singular. Autem, sort of related to out, like or. really means moreover here. It's kind of conjunction. Moreover, it, nominative singular, difficile non est. That's pretty straightforward. It is not difficult. So est is the verb to be, third person singular active indicative. Difficile is an adjective, like difficult. That's pretty clear from that. And the non being a negation. The construction is a predicate one though, so it is not difficult. Um, and we have another causal cum here. Since Valiamos. So we've got a present subjunctive. This is a first person plural. So Pompey referring back to himself and his audience. Valiamos, we have strength, but this is qualified by tantum. The neuter accusative here, it is kind of a direct object, but it's really adverbial. We have such strength. So the verb within itself has the sense of we have strength such. So really, we have such strength. Equitatu, the sphere in which equitatu being cavalry. So it is not difficult since we have such strength in cavalry. You could also translate that as superiority in cavalry to really capture what Caesar means here, or what Pompey and Caesar mean here. But the literal translation is we have such strength in cavalry, which I think suits it fine anyway, considering the maneuver that Pompey is intending to execute here. There you go. So just by translation, in this way, without danger to the legions and almost without bloodshed, we shall end the war. Moreover, it is not difficult since we have such strength in cavalry. So this is the other reason Pompey doesn't want to involve the infantry. He doesn't want any danger to come to Roman citizens, basically. So this is a theme that Caesar has written of earlier when he's describing his own operations against Pompey's lieutenants in Spain, that it was the humane decision, in his view, to cut off their supplies and compel them to surrender, rather than defeating them in a major battle and causing mass loss of life among Roman citizens. Pompey is expressing a similar sentiment here that, if possible, since it has come to a battle, he can minimize the casualties among the Roman citizens by making the cavalry the decisive arm. And in doing so, by causing basically a mass rout in Caesar's army before the lines engage, there's not really going to be a massive battle. Caesar's army is going to run away. The cavalry will chase them. They may kill a few of them, but the majority of them are going to surrender. And basically, those left over are going to surrender. And so Pompey sees this as a preferable alternative to a full-on infantry engagement with both lines or both armies in full, more or less, being engaged with each other and fighting hand to hand. Pompey, like Caesar, would prefer to preserve as many Roman citizen lives as he can, and in doing so, he innovates this operation by the cavalry. And on to the last sentence. Simul denuntiavit ut essent animo parati in posterum et, quoniam fiera demicandi potestas, ut saepe cogita visent, ne usu manuque reliquorum opinionem falerent. So we're now back into Caesar's sort of writing proper, so he's finished up with Pompey's speech there. At the same time, simul, adverbial, at the same time, in the same speech, denuntiavit. So we have a third person singular active indicative. This is perfect tense. Really means to encourage or to exhort, something along those lines. it doesn't really have. It's a flexible word. This sort of component of it, like the nuntiare, from which we get a word like nuncio, like a papal nuncio is an ambassador. It's someone who announces things or makes speeches on behalf of the person who sent them, who has a particular mission to fulfill, um, largely by means of talking, negotiating. And so it has a great deal of variety as a verb of speaking, um, because it can cover anything that an ambassador is required to say, from a sort of soft touch negotiation to commands to aggression, whatever it might be. So a fairly flexible verb. There's nuntiavit and denuntiavit, from which we get English denounce, but that's not really what's meant here. Um, Often translated as he ordered again, but I don't think he's really ordering here. It is more in the sense of encouragement, or at least that's what I think. And we have ut again, just introducing an indirect statement, kind of consecutive indirect statement, a little bit weird. And then we have another predicate construction. So really, he at the same time he exhorted them, he encouraged them. Uh, Essent, the verb to be in the imperfect subjunctive, third person plural active, that they be harati. So we have a participle, say plural perfect participle. We've actually met this pretty much this exact phrase before. That they be prepared, animo, so that's ablative singular. Be prepared in spirit. In posterum. Preposition in with the accusative of posteros, like English post, in the temporal sense of something that comes after. Really, that they be prepared against what was to come, the battle, obviously. And quoniam fiera dimicandi, rather, potestas. So I have quoniam meaning because or since, which I always remember this being like a precept of Latin, that it always takes the indicative verb, but every time I've seen it, it's taken a subjunctive because it's in a subordinate clause of some kind. Anyway, because or since, and we have our subject here, potestas, like power or potency, but it's a more extended meaning here. Power or potency brings about opportunities or abilities, and so it's really the opportunity that's a nominative singular feminine. Fieret, it's actually it's looks active. It's a passive form. It's a like alternative passive form of facio, facere. It's the imperfect subjunctive third person singular passive. So potestas is the subject. Fiera, uh, the opportunity being brought about. Dimikandi, and that's a gerund in the genitive of fighting. So verbal noun. The opportunity had been brought about of fighting. Ut, another ut. This time adverbial. As followed by another adverb. Saipe, which means often. Cogita wisent. And we have a pluperfect subjunctive here. So this is taking place before the point at which he's speaking. He's saying cogita wisent, like cogitation, to think on something, and by extension, something that is hoped for in this case. So lending a positive connotation to it. Hoped for or wished for, something along those lines. That's the third person's plural active, pluperfect subjunctive, as they had often hoped for, wished for, often thought about, like in that sense of thinking about something in a positive way and thus wishing for it. Nay. So we have the negative particle. So this is sort of a negative version of ut. Again, just indicating a negative indirect statement that is still dependent on denuntiavit. Nay, really, and not. Yeah, we'll do this part first, although it's going to be a bit weird. Yusu Manu que. So we have two ablatives joined by the que connective conjunction. So Yusu and Manu. It's a kind of Latin idiom. Manu referring to the hand, so it's like practical, and Yusu, which we've met in a few different forms, is more like the theoretical. It's kind of like the combination of theory and practice that Pompey's talking about here, or that Caesar is talking about rather. Um, but literally by the hand and by skill, or and by expertise, or by experience, something along those lines. Um, I've translated Manu as valor and Yusu as skill. I think Kennedy in his commentary refers to this as in the actual battle, which is fair enough. That is sort of what is meant, but it is referring to two different things. There's a few different ways to translate that, though. As I said, it is idiomatic. And so if you can come up with something, then go for it. I've gone for valor and skill. And so not by their valor and skill, fallerent. So we have another imperfect subjunctive, third person plural active, like English fall, but not in the physical sense, because that's a different word in Latin. That would be cadere or caderent. Here, it's fall. I mean, more in the transfigurative sense of fall, like the biblical fall. Um, it's not referring to the fact that Adam and Eve kind of slipped and fell over, but derived from that physical sense of falling over is like going astray, and sort of going in error, making mistakes, or really being led astray in the case of Adam and Eve. Um, to be put in the wrong, to be mistaken. The perfect form, or perfect participle, is falsum, from which we get English false. Um, that's the sense of this verb. It's really a fall in the more transfigurative sense. And so in the active form here, it's something like not to disappoint, opinionem, or not to even to fall short of, you might say. Opinionem, so like English opinion, but in this context, more like the expectation or the hope. Reliquarum. And so we have a genitive plural. It's a substantive adjective, though. Um, possessive. Really, the those left behind, those at home. It's sort of like reliquary, something kept in a safe place. And so here we have, in the plural, those left at home is probably the best translation, those left behind. So not to fall short, not to disappoint by their skill and their valor, or however you want to translate that, not to disappoint in the actual battle, the expectations or the hopes of those left behind, those at home. And that is more or less what I have here. So, in the same speech, he exhorted them to really need one instance of two there. To be prepared in spirit for what was to come, since the opportunity for fighting had been brought about just as they had often hoped for, and by their skill and their valour not to disappoint the expectations of those at home. So that's a final piece of encouragement from Pompey there um, before they head out to battle. Um, as I said, I don't think this means ordered. I mean, you can order people to feel good about themselves, but really it's more in the sense of encouragement or exhortation, as I've put here. Um, skill and valor, so I covered that. Disappoint, falerant, and reliquorum, those at home. Um, so there we are. That's about it for section 86. So this is Caesar's account of what he has been told, I think, by somebody either in the command tent or somebody who participated in the battle, that this was, in short, with some artistic license, this was what Pompey intended to achieve in the battle. And like Caesar, he's aiming at the preservation of Roman citizen lives. And that is one reason why he's opted for using the cavalry as the decisive arm. Having said that, it is also interesting to note in that vein that Caesar himself, not that he really has much of a choice, but he's not thinking in similar terms by this point. He's attempted to starve Pompey out, Pompey and his army at Dyrrhachium. When this failed, Caesar switched strategies into seeking out battle and defeating Pompey that way. He seemed like Caesar himself seems to have given up on the idea of being able to compel Pompey's army to surrender one way or another, or even in a battle, really to achieve a decisive victory without there being a major loss of Roman citizen lives, whereas Pompey is still attempting to preserve citizen lives here. So it's an interesting contrast of what is going on, and it is a sad fact, I think, that Pompey is going to pay the price for this strategy, which has the best of motivations, given the circumstances, perhaps the best of motivations, but is going to fail horribly. But on that note, I will leave it there for section 86. So hopefully that was interesting and enjoyable, and somewhat educational. As I try to emphasize throughout, it is just my own translation. It's not definitive, and certainly not the only translation. So it's really just to go through a translation exercise with the text, and in doing so, just gain a greater appreciation for what went on in the battle, and or depending on what text you're looking at, whatever it is that's going on, just gaining a greater appreciation for that through the additional focus that is required for a translation exercise of this kind. So there I will leave it. Next section, it is another speech given by Titus Labienus. It's going to be on what the Pompeian command thought was the state of Caesar's army at this point. So it is an important uh, precursor to the battle itself because it helps establish what the expectations were on Pompey's side. But as I said, I'll leave it there. Thanks for tuning in. And when I have the next section ready, I will put up the video. So stay safe, take care, and toodle pip.